In an era marked by shifting political landscapes and economic turbulence, recent developments surrounding Donald Trump's administration have captured national attention. As the 2025 political climate unfolds, Trump appears poised to exert even more influence with discussions of potential tariffs and the controversial prospect of a third presidential term dominating headlines. These actions are raising eyebrows among experts and political observers alike, who warn of far-reaching economic and social ramifications. On April 1, 2025, reports emerged indicating that Trump aides were drafting plans for sweeping tariffs aimed at addressing perceived trade imbalances. These tariffs could potentially affect all countries, with Trump emphasizing a need to revive domestic manufacturing and create jobs. Such measures, however, have sparked fears of economic damage, particularly within the construction sector, where rising material costs could exacerbate an already challenging housing affordability crisis. The top 10 global corporations have already reported a 13.2% decline in market value, marking the largest quarterly erosion since June 2022, largely attributed to the uncertainty surrounding these tariffs. In parallel, the political discourse surrounding Trump has become increasingly complex. A recent interview with Albert Mohler, the president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, highlighted a notable shift in the evangelical community's relationship with Trump. Mohler, who previously criticized Trump as an embarrassment, acknowledged supporting him in both the 2020 and 2024 elections. He articulated a pragmatic approach, suggesting that the moral complexities of political support must consider the current state of American politics. This sentiment reflects a broader trend among conservatives who see Trump as a disruptor capable of enacting the changes they believe are necessary for the nation's future. As Trump continues to consolidate power, the question of a potential third term looms large. Despite his insistence that he is not joking about seeking re-election, skepticism abounds regarding the feasibility of such a move. Notably, the lack of opposition from both political parties has raised concerns. Critics argue that the Democratic Party in particular has failed to mount a robust challenge, with many observers grading their responses to Trump as inadequate. This perception of capitulation is echoed across various sectors, including legal firms and academia, leading to fears of a broader descent into authoritarianism. While Trump's administration appears to be navigating a path of increasing assertiveness, the implications of his policies and potential third term are profound. The economic fallout from tariff implementations, combined with the political realignment within the Republican Party, suggests a turbulent path ahead. As many Americans grapple with the consequences of these developments, the debate surrounding empathy and governance has also gained traction, with figures like Mohler critiquing the use of empathy as a political tool rather than a moral obligation. Looking forward, the coming months will likely reveal whether Trump's trajectory will lead to a transformative era, or whether the mounting opposition, both domestic and international, will alter his course. As the world waits with bated breath for the April 2 announcement on tariffs, the implications of Trump's possible extended rule and the response of the political landscape will undoubtedly shape the future of American governance and its economic stability. In a bold assertion that has sparked widespread debate, President Donald Trump recently defended his administration's imposition of tariffs, claiming that the ultimate benefits will outweigh the short-term economic pain. This perspective, however, stands in stark contrast to the views of numerous economists and trade experts, who warn that the negative repercussions could far exceed any intended gains. During a joint address to Congress in early March, Trump declared tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again. And it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly. He acknowledged that there would be a little disturbance in the economy, but assured Americans that they would be okay with that. This optimism, however, is not universally shared. Economists are quick to point out that the trade war has already led to stock market volatility, heightened recession risks, and rising inflation that threatens American households. Since taking office, Trump has enacted a series of tariffs, including a 25% levy on steel and aluminum imports, 20% on Chinese goods, and new tariffs on automobiles and auto parts.
These measures intended to bolster U.S. manufacturing and reduce reliance on foreign imports have been met with mixed reactions.
While some companies such as Hyundai and Honda have announced plans to expand manufacturing in the U.S. to sidestep tariffs, many experts caution that the overall impact of such tariffs has been detrimental. Research indicates that job losses in industries affected by higher duties have often outweighed any gains, with studies showing that tariffs during Trump's first term led to more job losses than gains in protected sectors. Michael Strain, director of economic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, summarized this sentiment, stating,
"This is not going to succeed at reviving U.S. manufacturing.
The reality is that many manufacturers are reluctant to relocate established supply chains due to the uncertainty associated with the tariffs and the challenges of finding skilled labor in an environment of low unemployment. The complexities of shifting production back to the U.S. are compounded by the higher labor costs and the time it would take to set up new facilities. Companies like EVCO, which produces plastic parts, have expressed skepticism about relocating production from China to the U.S., citing the significant financial and logistical hurdles involved. Similarly, furniture manufacturers face challenges in reshoring due to the vast difference in labor costs compared to Asia, which would render their products uncompetitive in the market. Even companies that have committed to moving production, like Apple, which plans to add 20,000 jobs and produce AI servers in the U.S., are doing so cautiously.
Many CEOs have voiced concerns about making long-term decisions in a climate of tariff unpredictability.
General Motors Chief Financial Officer Paul Jacobson articulated this uncertainty, stating that the volatility surrounding tariffs complicates investment decisions significantly. Despite these challenges, the Trump administration remains optimistic about the long-term effects of its tariffs, asserting that they will ultimately lead to a manufacturing renaissance in the U.S. However, experts contend that the reality of globalization and the established nature of international supply chains make such a transition unlikely. Neil Bradley, executive vice president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, remarked, "We're always going to elect to sell things to people in other countries and buy things from them."
As the debate continues, the economic landscape remains precarious.
If tariffs lead to a recession, experts warn of potential job losses that could reach 3.5 million by 2027,
far exceeding any benefits derived from reshoring initiatives.
The challenge ahead lies not only in the effectiveness of tariffs but also in the broader context of economic policy that can support sustainable growth in the manufacturing sector. Looking forward, the lasting impact of Trump's trade policies will depend on a myriad of factors, including global economic conditions, domestic labor market dynamics, and the potential for bipartisan cooperation on trade and manufacturing strategies. As the administration navigates this complex terrain, the outcomes of these policies will be closely scrutinized, with implications that could shape the future of American manufacturing for years to come. In a startling admission, the Trump administration has acknowledged an administrative error that led to the wrongful deportation of a Maryland father, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who held protected legal status. This incident has raised significant concerns about the administration's immigration policies and the consequences of its enforcement actions.
The incident unfolded on March 15, 2025, when 3 planeloads of Salvadoran and Venezuelan deportees were sent to the notorious terrorism confinement center in El Salvador. According to court filings, the U.S. government recognized that Abrego Garcia, who arrived in the U.S. from El Salvador in 2011 and was shielded from deportation by a 2019 court order, had been mistakenly removed despite his protected status. Although ICE was aware of his protection from removal to El Salvador, Abrego Garcia was removed to El Salvador because of an administrative error, government attorneys stated in court. This revelation is significant,
as it marks the first time the Trump administration has admitted to such a mistake amid a broader crackdown on immigration enforcement. This deportation has left Abrego Garcia in a precarious situation, trapped in a foreign prison with limited legal recourse.
The Trump administration contends that U.S. courts lack jurisdiction to order his return, a stance that has sparked outrage among immigration advocates and legal experts.
The ramifications of this error extend beyond Abrego Garcia, as it highlights the potential for systemic failures within the government's immigration enforcement processes. This incident occurs against the backdrop of a politically charged environment, with Democratic Senator Cory Booker delivering a marathon speech on the Senate floor to protest the administration's policies. Beginning his address late Monday night, Booker emphasized the recklessness of the Trump administration, claiming that it has inflicted significant harm on Americans' safety and the foundations of democracy. He vowed to speak for as long as he could physically endure, shining a light on issues ranging from healthcare cuts to immigration reform. Booker's impassioned remarks underscore the urgency felt by many lawmakers as they grapple with the implications of the Trump administration's policies. In just 71 days, the president has inflicted harm after harm on Americans' safety, financial stability, and any sense of common decency, Booker remarked, highlighting the perceived crisis in governance. As the nation grapples with these pressing immigration issues, voters are also heading to the polls in pivotal special elections in Florida and a critical Supreme Court election in Wisconsin. These elections are seen as a referendum on the Trump administration's policies and will provide insight into voter sentiment as the administration embarks on its second term. With the Trump administration poised to sign more executive orders and potentially implement new tariffs, the political landscape remains volatile. The acknowledgement of wrongful deportations, coupled with the ongoing debates around healthcare and social safety nets, signifies a critical moment for both the administration and its opponents. As lawmakers continue to clash over these issues, the future of immigration policy and the administration's broader legislative agenda hangs in the balance, poised for further developments in the days and weeks ahead. In recent weeks, the economic landscape in the United States has been profoundly altered by a series of sweeping tariffs announced by President Donald Trump, leading to widespread concerns about their implications for both consumers and businesses. With Liberation Day set for April 2, when the president plans to enforce reciprocal tariffs on all nations he claims disadvantage U.S. products, the stakes have never been higher. Since taking office, Trump has embraced tariffs as a cornerstone of his economic policy, viewing them as a means to bolster American manufacturing and protect national security. He has rolled out tariffs on a broad array of products, including steel, aluminum, and automobiles, raising questions about how these measures will affect everyday Americans. According to Eric Levitz, a senior correspondent at Vox, these tariffs represent a significant shift in U.S. trade policy, one that could reverberate through the economy for years to come. To understand the mechanics of these tariffs, consider the example of the 25% levy on foreign-made cars that is set to take effect soon. Dealerships importing these vehicles will incur substantial costs, which they are likely to pass on to consumers in the form of higher prices. Economists estimate that this could raise the price of cars in the U.S. by anywhere from $4,000 to $15,000. The additional burden doesn't stop there. Many American manufacturers rely on imported parts, and any increase in costs could lead to higher prices across the board, affecting even domestically produced vehicles. The implications extend beyond the automotive sector. Levitz notes that similar tariff dynamics apply to various goods, and historical data supports this trajectory. For instance, tariffs imposed on washing machines in 2018 resulted in a 34% price increase over 4 years, outpacing overall inflation. Current estimates suggest that the tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China alone could reduce the average American household's disposable income by as much as $2,000. While tariffs are often positioned as a strategy to generate government revenue and stimulate domestic industry, their effectiveness is highly contentious. Trump's administration claims that the auto tariffs could yield $100 billion in revenue this year, but experts warn that the higher prices they create could ultimately dampen consumer purchasing power and hurt economic growth. The Federal Reserve is also closely monitoring these developments, seeking insights from businesses to gauge the potential impact on inflation and economic activity. The uncertainty stemming from these tariffs has caused hesitation among business leaders. Chris Bergen, who operates a greenhouse in Minnesota, expressed concern about rising costs and the potential impact of immigration policies on labor supply. Similarly, Susan M. Collins, president of the Boston Fed, reported that businesses are delaying investments and hiring decisions amid fears of escalating prices and slower growth. As the Fed deliberates its next steps, the economic outlook remains murky. While some data suggest resilience, such as low unemployment rates, other indicators reflect consumer anxiety and reduced spending. This juxtaposition has left many economists bracing for a possible stagflationary supply shock where rising prices coincide with economic stagnation. The political landscape surrounding Trump's tariffs is equally volatile. A recent CNN poll revealed that 61% of voters disapprove of the tariffs, highlighting a growing disconnect between the administration's economic goals and public sentiment. As the costs of tariffs mount, it remains uncertain whether the administration will pivot away from its aggressive trade stance, particularly if consumer dissatisfaction grows. In conclusion, Trump's tariffs are reshaping the economic environment, creating a complex web of challenges for consumers, businesses, and policymakers alike. As the administration approaches Liberation Day, the real test will be whether these measures achieve their intended goals without inflicting undue harm on the American economy. The coming weeks will be critical in determining the long-term viability of Trump's trade policies and their broader implications for the U.S. economy. In a landscape marked by escalating geopolitical tensions and internal political strife, recent developments involving U.S. defense policy have raised significant concerns about accountability and operational security. At the center of this storm is Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, who inadvertently leaked sensitive military information during a group chat on Signal, an encrypted messaging app. This incident, revealed by The Atlantic, has not only sparked outrage but also raised questions about Hegseth's ability to lead effectively in a critical role. On March 15, as preparation for a military strike against Houthi rebels in Yemen was underway, Hegseth unwittingly included Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, in a text thread meant for senior national security officials. The messages included detailed plans regarding the timing and specifics of the airstrikes, which were scheduled for just hours later. Goldberg recounted in his article, "I didn't think it could be real," underscoring the surreal nature of a journalist being privy to such sensitive communications. The incident has led to widespread criticism, particularly given Hegseth's previous rhetoric emphasizing stringent standards of accountability within the military. In a January communication to troops, he asserted, "Our standards will be high, uncompromising, and clear." However, as the fallout from this breach unfolds, Hegseth has maintained that his actions did not violate any security protocols, a stance that many in the military community find troubling. Retired military officials have expressed disbelief that Hegseth would share such sensitive details in a public forum, comparing his actions unfavorably to previous defense secretaries who maintained a more disciplined approach to information security. This controversy comes at a time when President Donald Trump has been vocal about NATO's financial contributions, urging European allies to increase their defense spending. In a related context, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk recently highlighted the importance of cooperation over confrontation, urging Trump to reconsider potential tariffs against allies. Tusk emphasized the shared interests of a strong U.S., a robust European Union, and a unified NATO, stating, "For us Poles, our friendship, our alliance, our mutual loyalty is not an abstraction." Poland has committed to spending 4.7% of its GDP on defense in 2025, reinforcing its position as a key ally in the region, particularly in light of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. However, the implications of Hegseth's blunder extend beyond diplomatic relations. They challenge the very foundation of trust within the military. As members of the armed forces face life-and-death decisions daily, the integrity of their leadership is paramount. Hegseth's handling of the situation has been characterized by defensiveness rather than accountability, as he has publicly dismissed the gravity of the breach and deflected blame onto others, including Michael Waltz, the individual who added Goldberg to the chat. The political landscape surrounding these events is fraught with complexities. Trump's administration has been marked by a series of controversies that have often overshadowed policy discussions. As national security issues become increasingly intertwined with political maneuvering, the potential for miscommunication and mismanagement looms large. As the dust settles on this incident, the ramifications for Hegseth's leadership and the broader implications for U.S. defense strategies remain uncertain. With ongoing calls for accountability and scrutiny over his actions, the Secretary of Defense faces a critical test of his credibility and effectiveness. The military community, alongside international allies, will be watching closely to gauge whether Hegseth can navigate this crisis and restore confidence in his leadership. Looking ahead, the intersection of military accountability and strategic diplomacy will be essential as the U.S. continues to navigate its role on the global stage.
The evolving dynamics between NATO allies, particularly in response to Trump's policies, will require careful management to ensure that cooperation remains prioritized over confrontation, reinforcing the notion that strong alliances are vital for collective security. The future of U.S. defense leadership and its international relationships will hinge on the ability to learn from these missteps and adapt to an increasingly complex geopolitical landscape. In recent months, the geopolitical landscape of the Western Hemisphere has been evolving dramatically, with the influence of the United States facing challenges from growing ties between regional nations and powers like China and Russia. As President Donald Trump embarks on a second term, his administration's approach to diplomacy in the Americas has shifted from rhetoric to aggressive transactional tactics that some argue may ultimately backfire. Historically, the United States maintained a dominant position in the Western Hemisphere throughout the 20th century. However, in the decades following, U.S. policy has frequently been characterized by neglect and a focus on internal issues, notably immigration and drug trafficking, rather than fostering meaningful relationships with neighboring countries. This disengagement has allowed China and Russia to expand their influence in the region, leading to a complex web of diplomatic and economic engagements that challenge U.S. hegemony. Trump's administration has sought to reassert American dominance by invoking the Monroe Doctrine, a historical declaration that emphasizes U.S. influence in the Americas, and by taking a hardline stance against perceived encroachments by China and Russia. During his first term, these efforts largely amounted to posturing, but the current administration has taken more concrete steps, adopting a predatory approach that leverages threats and demands to extract concessions from nations like Panama, Mexico, and El Salvador. For instance, Panama recently withdrew from China's Belt and Road Initiative following Trump's threats regarding the Panama Canal, reflecting a tactical retreat in favor of U.S. favor. Meanwhile, Mexico has been pressured into deploying military forces to its borders and accepting U.S. military training for its special forces in the face of potential tariffs and designations of cartel groups as terrorist organizations. Although these actions may present an image of regained U.S. authority, they mask significant underlying issues. Critically, such tactics have not fostered long-term stability or loyalty among regional leaders, who are increasingly hedging their bets by diversifying their international partnerships. Countries in the hemisphere are no longer solely reliant on the United States for economic opportunities and are actively seeking alternatives from nations like China, which has positioned itself as a reliable partner for investment and infrastructure development. China's strategic investments in Latin America have led to significant economic ties, with Beijing emerging as a primary trading partner for several nations even as U.S. influence wanes. In contrast, Russia has cultivated military relationships with countries like Cuba and Venezuela, enhancing its presence in the region through arms sales and intelligence support. Such developments suggest a growing discontent with U.S. policy and a recognition among Latin American leaders that they can pursue independent strategies that do not align strictly with U.S. interests. As Trump continues to employ a strategy rooted in intimidation and unilateral demands, he risks alienating partners who seek genuine reciprocal relationships. Regional countries are increasingly aware that they can afford to engage with multiple powers, including the US, China, and Russia, enjoying the flexibility that comes with such economic pluralism. This shift underscores the need for the US to reconsider its approach.
moving from coercive tactics to developing collaborative frameworks that address local priorities and concerns.
The stakes are high not only for the Western Hemisphere but also for global geopolitics. As tensions rise, the U.S. must navigate its relationships carefully to avoid further estrangement from its neighbors. A new diplomatic strategy that emphasizes engagement over coercion could provide the foundation for restoring trust and cooperation, ultimately safeguarding U.S. interests while respecting the sovereignty of its regional partners. Looking forward, the Trump administration faces a critical juncture. The success of its foreign policy initiatives in the Western Hemisphere will depend on its ability to adapt to a rapidly changing global landscape where nations are increasingly unwilling to align strictly with the traditional hegemon. As the U.S. seeks to redefine its role, it must recognize that true leadership in the region will require a nuanced understanding of local dynamics and the willingness to offer tangible benefits rather than imposing demands that may further sow discord among its neighbors. The coming months will likely test the resilience of U.S. influence and the capacity for diplomatic innovation in an increasingly multipolar world.